This week, I had a chance to go back to a system that I had shelved roughly 5 years ago. And the reason I ended up having to shelve the system is because part availability was terrible to basically non-existent for it. And that is the Gameboy Micro, which was a system that a viewer by the name of Nick sent out. And it's been a long time. However, parts now available. I was able to get this thing working, but there was a whole process to it, and I went ahead and captured it on camera as I was going through it, and I figured we would talk about Nintendo's smallest system they've ever made almost 20 years later. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and we're going to start today with this video's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by VITURE. Now, I have mentioned really enjoying the VITURE One XR glasses and being able to take a giant full HD screen with you on the go and connect up either a Steam Deck or a Nintendo Switch has made these glasses follow me around in my bag when I'm out. Since their launch, VITURE has become the most premium choice among XR AR glasses, winning several product design and innovation awards, as well as editor's choice by numerous media outlets, with much of the praise coming from unique features like myopia adjustments, letting you match your vision prescription with the turn of a dial. Recently, VITURE added support for Apple's spatial video, making it so you can film lifestyle 3D video and view them in these glasses, letting you relive the moment. I'm not a big iPhone user myself, but hearing about features like these, I'll admit, does make me consider making the jump. A big response I've heard is around the price being a bit too high. Well, in response, VITURE has now launched the VITURE One Lite for almost $100 less than before. With a standard USB-C connector and non-dimmable lenses, they're now a more affordable price of $349. Originally a Kickstarter exclusive, the popular white-themed glasses have been brought back in limited numbers for this release, and they look great. Using the magnetic connector to USB-C adapter, you're able to connect the One Lite to the neckband. The adapter also lets you use the neckband on any display, even other glasses. You can even connect it with the mobile dock and connect two pairs of glasses at once, letting you share the neckband with others. VITURE One Lite is available for pre-order exclusively on VITURE's website, and the white color is super limited. They also launched a small batch of white neckbands, but again, it is super limited, so be quick. Experience the new Reel at a more affordable price to kick off the new year. Thanks to VITURE for sponsoring today's video. Okay, let's recap what I have here so far. This Gameboy Micro wasn't charging at all originally, with evidence of water damage from the indicator sticker turning pink. I was able to jump the fuse to test it years ago, and while I could get it to turn on, it lasted less than a minute off the charger due to the battery being defective. Unfortunately, years ago, finding a battery for this handheld was extremely difficult. However, I've noticed that even extended batteries are being sold online now, so I picked the new one up, as well as an entirely new shell, to try and make this system look as factory as possible. In this case, I found a nice deep blue color for the casing and front faceplate. It also came with screws, but we'll be getting into that more later on. Nintendo put this thing together in a strange way. They mentioned that using metal for the casing was a bit different than what they've been used to with normally plastic handhelds, and I noticed the screws around the edges seemed to grab the casing a bit too much, leading them just getting stripped out completely. I think some of the screws that were in place originally got just destroyed outright trying to remove them, so go very slow with your driver if you need to take one of these apart. The back has a battery compartment on the right side that has a plug-in battery. I think this is where the water entered, since I remember there being a lot of corrosion inside, and I had to clean it up with a brush and alcohol. With the battery out, I had to remove a bunch of the screws underneath. This holds the front plastics together. The faceplate comes off, and Nintendo played into the idea of customizing by selling different covers that you could buy and just change out yourself. These are starting to be reproduced now and sold on places like eBay, but finding an original one at a decent price, it's rough. The blue Repro faceplate that came with this kit did fit fine. Unfortunately, I don't have much to compare to other than the chewed up silver one, but I don't have any obvious fitment issues here, so I guess it gets the job done. As I worked through removing the screen and motherboard, I decided it was a good time to do a deep cleaning of the bracing plastic, along with the buttons and the D-pad. The buttons were a little sticky and kind of the same with the D-pad. I went with the basics though, soaking in soap and water for an hour and then brushing around any edges and crevices with a toothbrush. Don't underestimate the power of just basic soap and water. It'll generally take care of any sticky buttons or dirty plastic you might have. I let everything dry for the good part of a day before putting it back together. I did try to get some of what appears to be rusting that had formed around the back of the screen with a Q-tip and alcohol, but it didn't really do much to fix things. Fortunately, the screen didn't appear to be affected by the liquid that had entered the system, so it shouldn't make a huge difference. While we have the system open though, the CPU, we can see here, is the same ARM7 processor that the Game Boy Advance uses at 16.8 megahertz. This brings up the question around why Nintendo chose not to include Game Boy or Game Boy Color support. And at first, I figured there was some hardware omission maybe to save money, but to my understanding, after looking into this a bit more, that's actually not the case. Some have been able to boot the Micro into its Game Boy mode, and this seems to just be a decision by Nintendo at the factory to lock out Game Boy support. It's hard to make sense of why they went this way, but if I had to just take a guess, maybe Nintendo thought it hurt the idea of this being a super portable handheld with a larger Game Boy cartridge sticking out the bottom, as opposed to the Game Boy Advance cartridges that sit flush, or maybe Nintendo just decided to Nintendo, who knows. Either way, we can still play Game Boy games with a certain aftermarket cart, and we'll look at that soon. Putting the Micro back together was an annoying experience with the middle plastic bracing that the board goes on one side of and the screen sits on the other. It's clear Nintendo understood making a system this small needed a way to stabilize everything, but it makes you wish you had an extra hand during assembly when the screen or the board decide to get a mind of their own and just completely jump out of the way. Eventually, I was able to get everything together, bringing me to the new battery. This is a replacement I came across on eBay that is larger than the original 460 milliamp hour, jumping up to 750 milliamp hours. This should give us a decent boost to the roughly 3 or 4 hours from the original battery. I did have to shave off some of the sides of the connector to make it fit, so just know it isn't exactly out of the box ready for installation without some slight modifications. I did a quick check for the charger to make sure the start and select buttons lit up, which they did. So far, so good. Powering the Micro on and the screen looks great. No issues at all. And all the buttons pressed down as intended. I still need to put screws in around the outside, and this is where things get frustrating for this system. The screws that came with the replacement shell were not great, and they stripped out very, very easily. I ordered new screws in a separate kit, and they did better, but really the way these replacement kits are set up, it's tough to get these screws flush without grinding away at that screw head. I got it to a position where it's, I'll say, good enough, but the Game Boy Micro is one of those systems where you take it apart once, it just never feels the same again. And this is unfortunate since there are only 2.5 million sold, so there's not a ton of these floating around. Anyway, now that the system is back together, we can take a look around and try out some games. We'll start with a tour of the system. On the top, we have our charge port, along with the L and R buttons that are a metallic chrome finish. These are very prone to chipping, as you can see here on the L button. The charge port does use a proprietary connector for the Micro, although some have already been able to replace this with a USB Type-C port. The right side has the volume rocker, on the left side is the battery door, and on the bottom, we have the on and off switch, cartridge slot, and headphone jack. Start and select are just above the cartridge slot at an angle, and they will light up during charging, as well as change to red when your battery is low. The front has our D-pad, A and B buttons, speaker grill, and the 2-inch screen coming in with a resolution of 240 by 160. Despite the screen being 0.9 inches smaller than the regular Game Boy Advance, this is actually the same pixel count and makes for a surprisingly sharp image. In fact, I would say that most people who have had any experience with the Micro probably remembers the screen specifically as the big standout. See, when you look at the small screen with the system off, you think there's no way that's going to work, but you power it on, even the smaller text is completely legible. It is an impressive thing to see in person, especially with it using the same type of backlit screen that is found in variations of the Game Boy Advance SP and the DS Lite. The screen can also get fairly bright. You change the settings by holding down L and pressing volume up and down. I actually found a mid-level brightness was perfectly usable in a well-lit room. For a quick size comparison, I have a Joy-Con that I can place next to it, and you'll see immediately, yes, the Game Boy Micro is, I would say, legitimately Nintendo's smallest system that they've ever produced, and it is completely portable to the point where you can put it in your pocket and you would probably not really notice it much. Here's a game called Jurassic Park 3 Park Builder, which has a ton of small text. It should work to show off the legibility of the screen and action here. I don't know if this is the best game to play on a handheld screen either way, but hey, everything that's going on here in this busy scene is definitely legible. And oh wait, sorry, hold on a minute. Have to evaluate my balance sheet in Jurassic Park. Sure, I guess. And oh, wait, it looks like I just beat the game. I wasn't expecting Jurassic Park 3 Park Builder to be my first game beat of the year, but here we are. Oh yeah, and as for Game Boy games, it is technically possible using a flash cart and the Goomba emulator. The games will run a bit weird sometimes, but it does function, and the screen seems to keep a close enough aspect ratio to not stretch things out. You'll get some odd stuff happening from time to time, like what I guess is just graphical glitching on the side here. Really, the only detriment to the Game Boy Micro is the size itself, ironically enough. It's not a great system to play for long periods of time. You're always crowding the system with your hands, and most people will probably end up with hand cramping if you play it for extended periods. It's not to say it's unplayable. Just understand, you're probably not spending hours and hours playing through Pokemon without feeling it. Also, the speaker isn't exactly great. I mean, it's a small speaker to begin with, but even at max volume, it's not exactly gonna rock the room around you. So in this case, I would recommend a nice pair of headphones. That said, I think the Game Boy Micro is a really fun piece of Nintendo's history, and all I really need to track down now for this one is the metal shielding that goes between the cartridge and the motherboard. It's a pretty unique piece to find online, so maybe I'll come across a completely destroyed Micro someday that I can salvage the part from. I think for this particular Game Boy Micro, that's where it's going to come to an end for me, though, and it's time for it to go back to its original home. So I did email Nick from years ago after we had to put this project on hold with the good news that it is fully functional. So Nick, if you're out there, check our email. We'll get this thing back out to you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it here for the Game Boy Micro. It was an interesting process to go through is what I'll say. And while I wouldn't recommend this as your primary system for playing Game Boy Advance games, I think it's definitely something that collectors would look into. And if you like the idea of a really, really small Game Boy Advance to take on the road with you, fits in your pocket easily and can play in spurts, this would probably be the one. But if not, honestly, a DS Lite would do fine for you, or even a Game Boy Advance SP, provided you can find the one with the backlit screen. But let me know what you guys think about all this down below, and especially if you're someone who owned a Game Boy Micro, did you use it when it had come out during that run next to the DS? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.